Sounds
Welcome,
good.
everyone. Eric Guy here with Christy Colley at Center for Victory. We're here today as part of a National Mental Health Awareness Month. Christy's going to be talking to us today about transforming your employee wellness practice into more of an employee well-being focus. You're going to give us some tips and techniques to do that, especially now that we're in the crisis that we're in, and how to move through that in a better standing and better mindset. So Christy, let's get started in all this.
Great. Great. Well, welcome everyone. It's nice to see some familiar names pop up on the screen, and welcome to all the folks I haven't had a chance to meet as of yet. I think that is top of mind for a lot of leaders as we're currently working through our return to work plans. Hopefully, we've all taken a little reality check and realized that the employees that we had up until the beginning of March, not the same employees that are coming. We've all been profoundly impacted and changed. So our work practices continuing to work with more of a remote design, or you're looking to phase in employees, or you've never missed a beat and you have essential services and you've been going 120%, since the beginning of March. I think recognizing that our employees may have some unique needs that are presenting in their both professional and personal lives, I think is of utmost importance to us as good business leaders. At the beginning of each year and the end of each year, we set goals and we look at results. And what allows us to transform that equation are our people and our processes. So how engaged are they? How well equipped are they? How focused are they? How supported are they? Will have a lot to do with the ultimate success. So our intent and our impact are really related. So Eric, given that it's the month of May and this is National Mental Health Awareness Month, I work with a number of mental health providers as part of my practice. And I think kind of intertwining a lot of the work that's being done with professionals and insurance and mental health providers and people taking a look at career navigation as a lot of roles are changing, all of this is kind of intersecting at the same time. So I want you to think about health as a state of mind, and wellness is really a state of being. So when we were talking about employee wellness programs, and if you just moved the slide, Eric, it's really gone on a continuum. And I think it's important for us as leaders to kind of recognize the trajectory of what traditional employee wellness programs, where they started and kind of how it's evolved. It started in the 80s with exercise and people walking clubs and companies putting gyms on site. That started in the late 70s with really big enterprise companies and carried into the 80s. It then transformed to looking at biometrics and measuring and predictive health indicators. So a lot of work on heart disease prevention, cholesterol, annual flu shots, things like that started coming to the workplace. Then we moved forward in the early 2000s, and all of a sudden, with the advent of bottled water, if you remember when that was a new thing, replacing, sweet sugary snacks or salty snacks in our vending machines, going to employee cafeterias that looked more like a restaurant than a soup kitchen. And then into 2010, looking at really resource access. Where can our employees tap into resources? So through the 90s and into 2010, EAP or employee assistance programs were a thread of continuity. But as a practice, a lot of organizations didn't really promote the use of it. We have it, it's part of our benefits package, but you've got to kind of work to figure out how to access it. Flexible spending accounts came up in the early 2000s, cafeteria menus of benefits. So lots of changes over the time, and now we're hit with a pandemic. Now we've had one of the biggest and only intersections of personal and career life occur, hitting everyone at the same time without a lot of preparation or consideration. So I want you to think about COVID-19 and the impact of all of this. It's not equitable. We're not all experiencing this the same way, and we're not going to be able to address it or meet the needs of our employees in the same way. It's not going to be kind of a turnkey approach. We're going to have to figure out what the needs are and look at how we can have resources to meet those needs versus pre-designing what those needs might be. And so that's kind of a flip. So if you go to the next slide, Eric, I think that this will be helpful. I want you to think about well-being. It's a combination of many factors that directly relate to both health and safety. Okay, it's about not just medical conditions or preventative programs, but holistically viewing your employee as a long-term relationship. Now, in recruitment and hiring and selection, especially over the past decade, we've talked about a talent shortage. We've talked about the career span for employees being in more short increments of time, that kind of a career employee is unheard of. But most employees are always looking for opportunity and that sense of belonging. And it starts with who they are and what they present as having, and they look at their organization as a resource to help them. And that's changed. For me, I'm Generation X, and it was we were kind of brought up with that idea that work and home life, those are two separate entities and you don't mix them. Millennials, not so much. And certainly Generation Y after them, they're looking for their companies. They're saying, I'm investing in you. I made a choice to join this organization. Now, how are you going to help me grow my career, but also grow as a person? So your corporate values, your company culture, the principles that you stand for, they want to see how those are thread through the resource availability that meets their needs. So well-being programs include more comprehensive health, access to programs that might help support emotional and mental health needs, not only for oneself, but maybe for my family members that are experiencing it, helping me to better cope with it or learn some techniques for coping with it. Access to social connectivity. A lot of organizations have kind of little subgroups, community groups that you can join depending on your interests, and find mentoring and coaching through that. Financial education. Millennials and Generation Y really look to their companies, look to their managers, and a Gallup poll studied this. They really expect that you're going to help them figure out how to manage their student debt, or be able to afford a house someday, or be able to have a retirement fund. They look at those needs as directly tied with what the company is saying they believe in and what they're willing to support. And then sense of fulfillment on the job, right? We spend the majority of our adult life at work, more so than anywhere else. So it really has a profound effect on who we are as people, not just the means to grow as a person. So with that in mind, let's flip to the next slide, Eric. So I want you to think about employee well-being as maybe having some unique and distinct goals in your company. Because we know in theory and we know in practice that healthy, stabilized, engaged employees really have a more predictable ratio of success, right? They put a little bit more into it. We talk a lot about that with predictive index, looking at really aligning people within roles and having goals and having their motivating needs met. But it's a really holistic approach. You might be looking at improved employee health or satisfaction, looking at morale or retention, promotability, looking at productivity, especially with maybe a change in trajectory on your company vision or focus or business proposition this year. Looking at your absenteeism, your time in attendance, your leave of absence requests, and what's behind those requests, what is the catalyst for the need. Looking at employee communications. Not every well-being program is going to be the same. It needs to almost have a menu, a resource guide that goes along with it. Two companies that are really doing a great job with this, I want to do a call out for Alera Group, which is an employee benefits national group. I've provided a website. They have a lot of blogs. And again, they do a great job with it. A lot of benefits providers are doing a great job with it. So make sure you're knowledgeable about what resources your employee benefit provider can offer that will really help you elevate your own program. They have a ton of resources, and for the most part, it comes right along with your premiums. So definitely take a look and tap into access there. Um, Another group that I think has done a remarkable job, there's a program offered through NAMI Keystone. NAMI is the National Association on Mental Illness. The Keystone chapter covers the state of Pennsylvania and also spills into kind of this tri-state region. They have a wonderful program that's called CEOs Against Stigma. And you can sign up for that program at no cost, and it actually provides you with an operational template to incorporate mental health as a primary facet of your employee wellness program. It kind of teaches you how. And I think that's where a lot of my clients, Eric, are saying, yeah, this all makes sense. In theory, I know we all want to, walk the talk, but how do we do this? And especially with mental health, how do we address or talk about something that a lot of us just feel really uncomfortable with? We don't necessarily possess a great level of confidence in our knowledge or our recognition of what to do when someone is maybe struggling with a mental health condition. Eric, do you have any comment on that with your background?
Sure. One thing that strikes me here is, you have this outline: career, financial, emotional, social, physical, and community. It's very much like the life wheel that we start out with anytime we get into a coaching situation or executive coaching situation with somebody, because if you're out of alignment, that's going to lead to stress. And a lot of people just don't know where that stress is coming from, which, if it goes unchecked, can lead to issues. But when it's aligned, and when you're, and I've been going through this a lot lately with people, because people are really checking in to say, okay, what do I want to really do with my life, with my occupation, in my community? This is a good time to check this, and this is a good time to do this as a really like a benchmark to say, where am I at, and then what do I want to do, and then move in those directions, in those areas, to get that balance and alignment. And what happens naturally is you're just going to feel that stress just gets alleviated the more you're in alignment with those things for you. And
right.
There's actually a great book that I recommended. I've actually given it away several times, The Dream Maker, and it goes through that.
Oh, yeah.
But it's a real easy read. But it goes through those kind of areas of really coaching people, what their life's aspirations are, from the bottom person on the rung to the top person on the rung, and really going through all that. Because when there's alignment there's really less issues with mental health, physical health, emotional, psychological. Taking those all into consideration, we should all be doing that, I believe.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. So one of the links that you'll see here, Gallup actually put together these 5 essential elements, which you can see depicted on the screen as an image. But if you click on that, I would wholeheartedly recommend that as business leaders, share that article, that write-up with your leadership team, and add this to a working agenda at one of your up and coming meetings, and assess, how well are we positioned to be able to address needs of our employees in any one of these 5 areas. Does our current programming, does our current resource access points make it easy for people to navigate or check out things that can help them, things that might need a unique need in their life right now, that otherwise, hadn't been something that they would prioritize. And I do believe that with your remote work approaches, that social connectivity piece of it is so important. That's where a lot of times with our interaction, in that intersection of our values and how we communicate and problem solve, right? All that stuff we go into with our PI clients, it's that intersection where we build trust. but that social piece of it, how we connect, how we relate to one another, how we see each other perform, has a lot to do with making that kind of imprint on our minds. And so I really want to encourage you to take a look at, if you have a remote work policy, how are you building in social connectivity options? Some people are more formal and they need to be given permission to take advantage of a resource. Some people are really informal and they're just going to make it up as they go along. You want to make sure you're managing expectations in both areas. So that might be a really great tool to use as part of considering, how focused are we on well-being? How does this fit in with our value proposition? So if you'd move to the next page, Eric. These are the dimensions kind of broken out in 4 areas of physical well-being and some of the principles that your organization may have, both formally or informally. Mental well-being is the area I'm focusing on for the purpose of this webinar, because it ties in with this month. And again, a lot of really timely resources that a lot of folks desperately need. Financial well-being. Well, I have to tell you, it is a weird year. And as far as looking down the road, it's hard to kind of speculate. So this might be an area that we really do need to pull in, even a program or a Zoom call or something for our employees to tap into. Not everyone has a financial planner. Not everyone has a financial advisor. Not everyone is really that contemporary or knowledgeable about what options they have. And if this can help reduce some longer term stress, that creates more room for engagement with their jobs. So that's something to keep an eye on. You may have a number of people who had planned on retirement, and now looking at the market and the performance, they may be really thinking twice about whether they can retire. That might be a key element in your human capital planning as you're looking at the rest of your workforce. So all of these things really tie together. And then career well-being, I think this is the best advice right now, even with so many reports of layoffs and job loss and restarting the economy. There's a lot of people really navigating career change, whether voluntarily or involuntarily. So in your companies, a dedicated focus and continued messaging about career pathing and staying with us. There are people who are being hired every day and people are being poached. So just because of the pandemic doesn't mean that your talent isn't being sought. So make sure that you're investing in their career well-being, just to give that additive measure of, hey, we're really here for you and we want you to stay dedicated with us. So Eric, if you go to the next page, this is really the clincher. So with well-being in a spotlight, looking at mental health, sometimes I've heard from different clients or prospects when they're talking about this topic, they're saying, well, I don't want to bring it up. I don't want to plant the seed with somebody that they're not doing well, or maybe they're having some problems, or it's really easy for us to make observations and assume that it is because they're overworked, they're overstressed, they're not organized enough, they don't have time management, they're not delegating. We kind of go to those assumptions of why someone's performance might be off. And what I really want to bring to your attention is that mental health is one of the biggest issues in your workplace today. You're already living with it. 1 in 4 Americans is struggling with mental health, either themselves or a direct member of their family. And I remember the old adage that you're, as a parent, which I am of a 17-year-old right now, you're only as well as your unhealthiest child, right? Like, it's directly related. Well, it's the same thing for our employees as they're struggling with concern about our kids and our elderly parents, and some of them have been sick and we can't even see them, and working at home for 2 months and with the whole family. And there's a lot going on. And so you can see the direct impact in your work environment. And on the right-hand side of this wheel, these are things that often we assume are coming about because of other things. We don't always see the thread of mental health tying in through all of these. And I will tell you that, you know, when something happens to someone at work, it profoundly affects everyone. I remember being a young HR manager, one of my first regional positions for a major retailer, and one of our managers committed suicide at work. And just dealing with the police and the first responders and that individual and his direct colleagues and calling his family, I mean, it's something that will never leave me. And I remember meeting with people afterwards, and so many people were saying, like, I just wish I would have known he was having such a hard time. I wish I would have said something. We said, as you know, corporate benefits people, oh my gosh, like, where do we miss the mark on making sure he knew that there was access to resources? So this is something I want to really take a few minutes and talk through with you, because this is usually where our discomfort or our lack of knowledge or confidence in the topic and resources really helps steer us away sometimes of having a meaningful discussion. So if you'd go to the next slide, Eric. So a lot of times we are working with people and making more observations about them, even working remotely because of our virtual environment, than sometimes their own family members. And everyone can have an off day. Everyone can have an off week. Heck, you know, with the pandemic, everybody can have an off 15 weeks, right? It's just so new. But really, when you're observing responses and noting a pattern, this really requires you as a leader to be really present in your interaction with your employees. Really being mindful, not just of getting through the agenda or getting through the report list, but really monitoring and watching, absorbing how they're relating to their work itself. What you want to watch for and understanding if your employees are okay. And this is not an exhaustive list, but it's looking at performance shifts, looking at significant changes in personal appearance, looking at almost a neutral or passive response. That might come out sometimes when people are going on to anti-anxiety or depression medication. It takes a couple of weeks to kind of normalize out, and sometimes there's some really significant side effects that really can affect somebody's ability to energetically engage. So watch for that. Watch for emotional reaction, angry or really weepy reactions to things. Distancing, negative self-talk that is actually inside voices that allow someone really putting themselves down. Sometimes it's more than just a way of phrasing something. And I think a go-to approach for any caring manager is just saying, hey, I noticed a change in you over the past few weeks and I care about you. You know, are you okay? Do you want to talk? I have to ask, are you getting some resources for support and care? I'm available. Some managers may feel uncomfortable directly sharing that. Other managers may self-reveal. Hey everyone, I just want to take a mental health check with all of you and make sure you're doing okay. I know I'm really struggling myself and I'm finding myself, you know, really getting impatient and really kind of feeling down. Here's what I'm doing about it. I called my PC, I did some telemedicine. Okay, so I guess I'm breaking up. These are some quick resources. All right. I'm sorry, guys. Hang on with me just a minute here. I'm going to stop my video. That might help. Okay, hey, Eric, can you take this one? Eric?
You're cutting out, Christy, for some reason. So when we look at this, folks, we're looking at while we're waiting for Christy to come back online there, you know, be thinking about the the recent crisis has affected your workplace and workforce. I think Christy touched on it a little bit.
Hey, Eric, can you hear me?
Go for it.
Okay, if everyone can hear me, and again, I apologize to you for the quality. I think just really being focused and asking employees if they're right, okay, and remembering that because of mental health stigma, the majority of people who are struggling will not initiate outreach for help themselves. So offer to place the call to the EAP with them. Offer to set it up for them. Provide them access to resources so that they know how to navigate, and then be available. And if you're not comfortable doing that, find someone else in the organization who may. And that might be part of your crisis response team. Making sure we're partnering with people to get them the help they need. This is a long-term strategy to ensure a healthy workforce. Can you go to the next slide, Eric? So some next steps for your company, really taking a look at your people data. Your people data will tell you an awful lot about what's happening and where your employees might need help. Take a look at turnover, absenteeism. Take a look at your pharma rate on your benefits plan. Cover requests. Some adjustment for looking at milestones. There's a lot of information. Again, if you look at that NAMI Keystone site, a lot of this can be guided there, and I would strongly suggest you take a look at it. And it all comes together for your company. I really recommend that you take a look at Rehumanizing the Workforce. It's a wonderful book, and it's just a fresh approach to looking at kind of that synergy between company vision and values and our employees themselves. So take a couple of minutes with your leadership team, take a look at these questions, check out the resources by Lara Group. I really like the way they structured it, and they have a lot of articles and blogs. And also check out that CEOs Against Stigma program. I think you will be surprised at the amount of resourcing available to you. And I'm open for any questions.
Hey, Christy, if we can continue a good connection here, your thoughts on, I mean, I definitely know my thoughts, but your thoughts on one, job fit, and then the manager's role in employees' mental health.
Yeah. So we've talked about managers. We have a responsibility. One, we have a duty of care for our companies and our employees. And so getting comfortable with talking through and actively listening to what are some of the challenges that employees are having focusing on their work, getting things accomplished, maybe relating or working with others. I think it's fair to say across the board, a lot of people have been, reporting, self-revealing, like, hey, I've lost my mojo. Like, it's just hard for me to kind of get up and get going each week with this stuff. And so I think managers being authentic and being self-aware, it can go a long way. It can be a very powerful tool if used responsibly, and saying, here are some techniques that I'm using. Let's think through what are some things we can do. So I think shifting conversations with employees to being more solution oriented than just identifying all the things that aren't working right, I think can help kind of pull people out of that vortex. Making sure that you're really advocating for getting professional help. There's nothing wrong with it. It's not something that, you're being judged over. Actually, we see that as you're taking care of what you need to take care of. So I would strongly encourage you to have a list of resources that work with your benefits available that managers could share with employees. If employees are struggling, putting one more step in the process makes it even more difficult to get the help they need. Now, separately, sometimes it's not as dire as that situation I just described. It's just somebody's just struggling with their job. So do the job assessments again. The workplace has changed. If people are working more remotely now and connecting by voice instead of in person, that may really change their process. So really understanding how we're expecting the job to be performed now would be really important. So those of you who are PI clients, utilize that job assessment. See if the jobs have really changed in the minds of the employees as well as the manager, and look to manage those gaps with techniques and strategies. I think the point is to really help support people's ability to adapt. We're all capable of doing a lot of things, even for a longer term period, such as COVID-19. But there comes a tipping point where you kind of snap back to who you are. We want people to thrive. And so really using the analytics to even understand how to best approach these conversations is really important. The key in tying all of this together, you cannot have an employee wellness program or well-being program without a healthy dose of employee engagement. And you can't get into employee engagement if you're not willing to listen and understand where you're meeting them, right? You got to meet people where they are and bring them along for the journey. So I think really incorporating some smart practices for your company and using the tools and resources you have through PI, and tap into us, your dedicated coaches with PI. And that's where we shine. This is like our favorite thing to help you with. So please call on us.
And some of you, just a little plug here, some of you have this in your PI systems, but there's an employee engagement survey inside of some PI systems called Diagnose. Real great tool that you can use over and over again to gauge employee engagement and benchmark that and make some good moves and have some opportunities. It'll show you what you're doing well, give you some opportunities for where you're not doing so well, and we can come alongside and help with that in any way possible. Any other questions? All right, if that's it, Christy, thanks so much. All of you that are on the line, thank you very much. Stay healthy, stay well, and we'll be talking to you soon.
Thanks so much, and let me know if anyone needs anything, and we'll make sure to get the deck back out to you.